All right, happy Sunday night. It is exciting to, first of all, to have that video, which I've been working on all day, but also to be joined by my good friends on the left. Chris is here, and then on the libertarian side, Kyle is here, and then, of course, myself representing the conservative side as we host another episode of Refounding Fathers. So happy to have you guys on. Welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I put together that intro past couple of days of trying my hand at After Effects. But what did you guys think? Do you think that kind of captures the the spirit of what we're doing here? What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you think about all the different things that are kind of listed through that whole intro video. Civil rights, innovation. Even things like terrorism. Yeah, it just kind of hits home on a lot of things that the American spirit is about and is kind of tackled throughout our history. Yeah.
Yeah, how about you, Chris?
Yeah, it reminded me of the recent push by the Trump administration to push patriotic education in our schools as kind of a rejoinder to the 1619 project, a thing that most Americans have probably not heard of. But there's this idea that liberals focus too much on the negative side of American history, whereas conservatives focus, too much on the idea that we're the best in the world and we've never done anything wrong. And obviously, those are straw men to a degree.
Yeah.
But I like that on this show we're finding the middle ground. We're talking about problems in American history and how to solve them. And that tension is part of our history and not something that should be ignored or swept away or characterized as one extreme or the other.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the intent behind having that intro, and really the intent of the show is this notion that you make me a better conservative by us talking, and hopefully I can do the same for you. Because if I just, live in this world where it's always talking to people who, rubber stamp what I'm saying, who, echo back to me what I'm saying, then I never really get challenged and I never go back and examine some of my assumptions. And in many cases, I'm probably, going to reach the same conclusion, but maybe I can defend it better. Maybe I understand what the, arguments against it are. And hopefully the same for you guys is, it's this notion where you can go back to, Democratic circles, Chris, or libertarian circles, Kyle, and you're like, well, this is what the conservatives are saying. This is their argument. What do we think about it? Does it, cause us to rethink or shape, what we're doing? And then in terms of the video itself, of getting to this idea that almost every major accomplishment in our country's history has been, at least to some degree, a bipartisan effort, right? Like when you
that's right.
list those things like terrorism. Well, we've had different administrations that have responded to terrorism. I remember being in Afghanistan, and it was John Kerry who was negotiating the peace between two different factions in Afghanistan and trying to salvage the election, right? And he did an amazing job at that. So I don't agree with him on a whole lot of things, but I'm glad that he was there to do that. And I have no problem admitting that, he did a good job. At the same time, there's been many Republican accomplishments. Obviously, George W. Bush, responding to 9/11. We could talk about that, but I could go through history and see that. And so that's really the same thing with this show, is maybe we put our heads together as a Democrat, a conservative, and a libertarian, and let's see what kind of solutions we get. So super excited to be talking about that. So there's a couple of things that we want to get into. The first is the big news of a Supreme Court nominee in Amy Coney Barrett, who has just been nominated by Donald Trump to fill the seat that has been vacated by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I mean, this is just huge news. We did a whole show on kind of talking about RBG and the legacy that she had, and in my opinion, how well Trump, responded when he heard that news. But then at the same time, it quickly has transitioned into this situation where it is, hugely controversial that Trump is trying to fill it quickly. But at the same time, I know a lot of conservatives, myself included, are happy with the choice that he's put up. So starting with Chris, just want to give you a chance. Talk to us first. Give me your impression, of this situation, and especially the legacy that's been left behind by Ginsburg passing.
Definitely. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, obviously an icon, someone who accomplished a great deal for women's rights before she ever became a Supreme Court justice, and then was definitely someone who was very solidly progressive while on the court. She will be missed dearly. She definitely has a legacy that is almost unparalleled as far as Supreme Court justices. First woman to be laid in state, first Jewish person to be laid in state as well. So those are also very important aspects of her legacy. As far as Amy Coney Barrett, I have not been able to look into her rulings too much. I don't have much of an opinion on her as a justice at the moment. I do have an opinion on the process that is happening right now and the hypocrisy that is being shown by congressional Republicans in trying to get a justice in a month before an election, when the previous argument was that it is wrong to push in a new Supreme Court justice in an election year.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a standard they set that was brand new standard in 2016, and a standard that I never expected them to hold to. But it's hard to be disappointed, but I think I'm still a little bit disappointed.
Well, so we're definitely going to get into that over the next few minutes. But I mean, you are right, I think, in that this changes the debate. And then, of course, I think it's got to play into the election as well that's coming up. So what are your thoughts in response and on that, Kyle?
Yeah, RGB, definitely an icon, definitely someone who, even though I disagreed with her on quite a few many things, was still an excellent example of someone who served her country well and for a long time. So definitely should be applauded and revered for that. Crazy to think, I actually didn't know that, Chris, that she was the first Jewish person to be laid in state. That's quite an accomplishment and long overdue for sure. Yeah, so RBG will be missed for sure by many on the court. I will say this, talking about the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, or Coney, I keep saying Coney Barrett. Chris pointed to that, it's a standard of hypocrisy for the Republicans. And I can see why some might say that. I myself thought that Merrick Garland should have gotten a fair hearing in 2016. But Mitch McConnell, who's now pushing for the hearing here, pushing for this vote, was actually pretty consistent because Republicans held the House in 2016, where obviously Obama, a Democrat, was the president. So for that reason, agree with it or not, he said that's why they shouldn't have gone for that nomination, that hearing process. And now, because of the unified presidency and Senate majority, so he's actually been pretty consistent on that. I personally also think it is a little bit hypocritical. I think Merrick Garland should have gotten a hearing, and I think that Coney Barrett should get a hearing as well. But yeah, so honestly, I think it's a pretty brilliant political move here by Trump, though. You look back to when Trump was had his highest approval rating, and it's right when the Kavanaugh hearing was, when that whole monkey show was going on, where just the Senate hearings were a mess, and the big fight where Lindsey Graham actually decided to have a backbone and stand up and do some things, and along with the other Senate Republicans. So good move by Trump going to the election, I think, but I think it's going to pull out highest vote. I'm going to make this prediction: highest voting turnout maybe in the history of our nation this year, because of what both sides see is at stake here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before in our last show, making our predictions for the election, and I think one of the things that you had said, Kyle, was you predicted that it was going to turn sharply towards Trump in the last few days or weeks, the same way it did back in 2016. I guess that's my question to you guys. Well, first with you, Kyle, is this the trigger that's going to make that happen in your mind?
I don't know. I don't think that he actually needed this. I don't know that this necessarily actually gets him in excess of voters. I think that's going to pull out a number of voters on both sides, honestly. So I don't think this is the thing that's going to turn it. I think that it was already going to turn. I think this just amplifies the voices on both sides.
Interesting. Yeah. As a conservative, first of all, this to me, and we kind of talked about it last time as well, this to me is really the biggest appeal of Trump. Is there is the belief on the conservative side that abortion is a truly horrible thing, and it is killing life, right? And the fact that many states still have it in later stages really motivates us to do something about it. And this we see in the Supreme Court, and shifting the Supreme Court as the best way to do that. And so to go from Ginsburg to a reliably conservative nominee in Barrett, someone who is Catholic, so a Christian, Notre Dame Law School, and that many people are excited about, really is that was the biggest argument for voting for Trump 2016, and I think it's going to be a huge pull now. But does that bring in more voters? I don't know. I'm not sure, because we already kind of knew this about Trump. This was his appeal, is that he had delivered in our mind on Kavanaugh. Gorsuch, not bad. Certainly more conservative than what it could have been, and especially what we've seen by other Republican presidents in the past who have promised conservative justices and given us more moderates. And so we believe that this is it. So, but it's not necessarily new. It's good for us that it's happening. So I don't know if it's going to make a big.
That's right. And
yeah, go ahead.
And don't forget that Breyer is 82. So, within the next 4 years, anything could happen with that. So, I mean, Trump could potentially be nominating 4 justices throughout his tenure as president.
Yeah.
So, pretty crazy to think about.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So I kind of both agree and disagree with what's being said here. I think Trump did need this, because I think a big factor that was really going to help Joe Biden in 2020 was unmotivated Trump voters. People who voted for Trump in 2016 but didn't necessarily feel jazzed about it in 2020. And you're right, a common justification for kind of the anti-Trump Republicans is, we got to do this for the justices. We got to do this to stop abortion. Now, I don't really think that Amy Coney Barrett is going to be the deciding vote in any case that overturns Roe v. Wade. I've never actually had the actual mechanism where that happens explained to me. So I'm always a little bit skeptical of that. But that certainly is the promise. And I think if you look at the Supreme Court over the past year, there have been a lot of decisions that have really disappointed the right, and decisions that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, in one case or another, signed off on.
Yeah.
And so I think the court was starting to fade into the background as a reason for voting for Trump. And then with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, all of a sudden that became the number one issue once again. Yeah. So I do think it is definitely a complicating factor for the election. I still really like Biden's odds. Kyle has a really good point that it could turn out votes for both the left and the right. But I think the left was already highly motivated by getting rid of Trump. It could pull in maybe that far left sector that was, Bernie or bust, that wasn't going to cast a vote for Biden. But now that they see abortion rights under threat, they may do so. However, I think in the long run, I think this does help Trump.
That's my question for you, Chris, is are you guys tired of losing? I mean, you think about the number of, not just the Supreme Court, right? Think about all the other federal justices that he has filled. He's heading towards 300. And granted, some of this, has kind of fallen into his lap. Obviously, no one could have predicted necessarily that it would happen right now with Ginsburg, and then, the other two, right? It's those things that just happened, and then he, being president, had the opportunity, right, as opposed to policy or ramming something through Congress or whatever that's, he can control a little bit more. These are situations that were given to him based upon the position. But it's got to make you nervous as a liberal to see, it's one thing for Scalia to go and then we replace him with a conservative justice. It's another thing to take the most liberal, long-standing justice, the most reliable one for you, and then to replace that with someone who is avowedly pro-life. And, that's really the impression that I'm getting from what everybody is saying, is that she's very clear about that, and that's someone that he was even looking to put in instead of Kavanaugh. So, as a conservative...
Yeah, I wouldn't say...
Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't say I'm tired of losing. I would say I'm tired of losing undemocratically. And I'm tired of losing to someone this cartoonishly incompetent.
What do you think, Kyle? get you in here on this. One of the last words on that, and then we'll move to the second topic.
Sure. So I think that no matter what happens, I don't think anything happens to Roe. Honestly, I think both sides are amping up this. We've got to do this for Roe versus Wade. We've got to do this for abortion. And at the end of the day, Amy Coney Barrett's vote is not going to be the one that overturns Roe v. Wade. We've had so many soft justices in the past, even conservative ones. And honestly, the difference between the conservative justice and the liberal justices is that conservatives obviously want to conserve. If there's precedent, they're not likely to overturn it. And Roe v. Wade's been set in stone for so long that it's really hard to believe that any of these conservative justices are going to overturn that. So,
well, we'll see. That's certainly what conservatives want to see happen, and I think if most conservatives are honest with you, as I try to be, that even if it is precedent, even if it is a step away from stare decisis, conservatives would support it. I would tell you from my thinking that Roe v. Wade being so poorly written the way that it was is a major factor in that. So I could go further, but so many conservatives have supported and voted for Trump, which is a step away from traditional conservatism for the Supreme Court. So to have something, to have a ruling or a justification and an opinion that isn't the best, but that saves lives, that saves, makes a difference in terms of what we believe to be children that are being killed, for us is kind of an end justifies the means thing. So that's really the argument and the hope for a lot of us. And we'll see if it pays off.
I hope you're right.
We'll see. So
I hope you're right.
Let's get into.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So yeah, the argument there is that the ends justify the means, because voting for Trump, despite his many character flaws and maybe the issues in which he has not followed traditional conservative values, is the cost of ending abortion.
Yep.
But what if it doesn't actually end abortion? What if it doesn't actually reduce abortion at all? I mean, Kyle's right that he could eventually get 4 conservative justices on the bench.
Yeah.
He does that. Roe v. Wade still doesn't get overturned. What kind of reflection does the conservative movement do at that point about whether or not, especially the pro-life movement, about whether or not this vote for Trump in 2 separate elections was worth it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll answer that as best I can real quick, and then we'll kind of head on to a different topic, because we could do an entire episode, I think, on abortion. Maybe that's something we should do. But there has been historically like an agenda or a desire to keep justices removed from from particular issues, right? There's been, and you see that in their confirmation hearings, is that you ask someone like Gorsuch or Kavanaugh, and everybody knows that these guys are pro-life. Would you overturn Roe v. Wade? And they kind of dance around it and say, well, it's my tendency to look at precedent and I will examine it thoroughly. And they give you these political answers about a political question instead of saying, I'm a pro-life judge, and if the opportunity came up, I would overturn Roe v. Wade, right? But I think we are getting to that point, and you may even see it with Barrett, is we are starting to get to a point where justices will tell you how they will rule on specific cases, or make that veil so thin, right, that it's barely there in terms of where they would stand on particular cases. Before, we've kind of hid behind the rule of law and I'm a textualist, I'm originalist, whatever, right? But I think now it's become, the patience, I agree with you, Chris, is waning because we don't always get what we want. But I think I think Trump especially is looking for the type of judge that, one, has the credibility, and two, is willing to actually say what everyone is thinking. So we could get to that point where there truly is, hey, you are in here for this law, right? Which I don't know if we've ever been there specifically. And again, as a conservative, we see this on the level of slavery today. We see abortion as the crisis, as the moral injustice of our time, especially in the second and third trimester. And how are you going to be in public office, whether you're in the Supreme Court or the president or whatever, in a time of slavery and not have a stance on the issue? It's the same thing here in our minds. But obviously not everyone shares that view, and I think that's the difference. But I think, I think at this point, it's pretty clear where more and more so where these justices stand on it. So that kind of leads us into the debate, which is coming up here in just a couple days, right? So we're obviously going back and forth on this issue of the Supreme Court. I've got to imagine that that is going to be one of the main topics whenever they host the debate on Tuesday night. What do you guys think? Do you think it's going to be dominated, by this discussion? Do you think that they're going to bring up COVID-19 and talk about that all day, or is it going to be something totally? Are they going to talk about the economy and unemployment or foreign policy? What do you think, Kyle? What do you think are going to be the major topics?
Yeah, I think COVID-19 is definitely going to be one of the leading topics, especially in terms about leadership. I think that both Trump and Biden have a history of saying and retracting and then restating a number of positions about what they have done / would have done. So I can see that going a lot of different ways. I think, COVID's going to be the big one. The economy is going to be the big one, which, I saw today there was a group of restaurant owners and small business owners wrote a letter, supporting Trump or supporting Biden, saying that it's Trump's fault that all their businesses are being shut down, which is insane to me. I think those are going to be by far the biggest issues that are going to be talked about.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think Biden probably won't talk too much about the Supreme Court fight because that's going to lead into the question of whether he supports this idea of court packing, which I don't think is something that Biden wants to talk about. One of Biden's key strategies has been not scaring potential swing voters, and I think that is something that might scare some people or might seem a little bit radical to some of that middle of the road people that Biden needs to win. I do think he will be very happy to talk about COVID because I think if you look at Biden's record of statements on COVID-19 and you juxtapose them to what Trump was saying on the exact same days, I think it's night and day. And I think it makes it very clear what kind of leader could have led us through this crisis better, could have taken it more seriously from the beginning, and could have kept it from being prolonged to the extent that we see now.
I think one of the biggest issues, and maybe they don't talk about this explicitly, but I think will certainly come up, is the state of Biden's mental capacity, which has been the attack from conservatives for the past several weeks. I'm going to bring up some of the questions that we have here. These are from some of our followers because we asked the question of, what do you want to see talked about debates? And this was from one of our followers who said, Vice President Biden, have you been tested for dementia? And if you did, who did it? And what was the diagnosis? It makes me think of when Trump was tested for his health. And, he came back with, amazing results, right? So I think that's got to be one of those things. And I think it's going to be very clear, from the beginning, where is Biden at? I saw an ad from CNN, and it was the debate between Biden and Paul Ryan. And they were going back and forth. And I think it was pretty clear in that debate that whether you like or dislike Joe Biden, whether you agree or disagree, mentally he was very present. He was giving Paul Ryan a run for his money. And so, I think that's what CNN wants to see. Is he as sharp now as he was way back then in 2012, right, when he was running? So, and if there's any misstep, I think that's going to be and even if there isn't, frankly, that's what conservatives are going to jump on. What do you think, Kyle? Do you think that's going to be a top issue as well?
I don't know, but I know a little bit about PR, and I know about setting expectations. And I'm not the first one to have this thought, but Trump's got to do a better job managing expectations because he keeps calling him Sleepy Joe, and everyone keeps talking about how Sleepy Joe's lost it, and he's not as quick as he used to be, and he's kind of maybe in these early stages of dementia. And what happens? You set that bar so low. Biden doesn't even have to be good. Right. Biden doesn't even have to be exceptional. Biden can just be adequate. And because the expectations have been set so low, he's going to come and he's going to look sharp, So I think if I were Trump, I would say, listen, this guy's full of experience. He's been doing this for 47 years, literally 20%. As long as we've been a country, he's been a congressman for 20% of our country's existence. He's got experience. And, and then that sets the bar high. So that way, if Joe has a gaffe or two, that kind of knocks him down. So, I think Trump's definitely got to do a better job of managing expectations here.
So, like Chris, if you were Biden's debate coach, what would you tell him? What would be the strategy? Which, since you're
I'm
not,
not
you can go
sure.
and tell us, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, well, Biden definitely has some strengths and weaknesses when it comes to debates. I do remember his debates with Paul Ryan and even debates with Sarah Palin, and he can come across very cocky. He can come across arrogant and smug, which, as a liberal, I enjoy. But people on the other side, or those middle of the road voters, often don't. And so I would tell him not necessarily to play to people like me,
mm,
but to play to people in the middle, to play to those potential swing voters, to really make an effort to appeal to people who aren't smug liberals like myself. As far as the managing expectations, I 100% agree with Kyle. And you would think Trump would have learned from his own experience in 2016 when the bar for him was set at the very floor as to how he would do in the debates with Hillary Clinton.
yeah,
And now Hillary Clinton, of course, won all of those debates, but he, did do a bit better than expected because of his aggressive style, because of Hillary's inability to respond to certain lines of attacks. Um, but I don't think a moderator will ask him, have you taken a dementia test? Of course, we all know no one has ever passed a dementia test as well as Trump passed a dementia test. But if you're taking a dementia test, it's because people around you are worried that you have dementia. So that's always been a very strange brag to hear from President Trump. But it is something that Trump will definitely bring up himself. He will go off topic. He will ramble. He will attack in the most classless and ungraceful manner possible. And I think Biden is someone who will be a little bit unfazed by that. Biden himself is aggressive. We've seen videos of Biden getting aggressive
yep,
with voters, even.
definitely have.
We've also seen some videos recently of him being very sharp. So you're right. He's not exactly in his the prime of his life. He definitely has stumbled quite a few times. He's got a history of gaffes that goes back decades. But I think if we're really talking about those, we are again kind of holding him to a totally different standard, the standard of a normal politician
Mm,
that no one would ever hold President
mm.
Trump to.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Hillary Clinton's right debates, and one of the regrets that she had is that she didn't attack Trump, right? Like she didn't like call him a creep or something, right? Like she held back and
Yeah.
tried to, I guess be, above that or whatever. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Biden handles it, because Trump certainly will try to make as many memes and gifs as he can. Um,
Mhm.
and then secondly, for Biden himself, I wouldn't characterize his campaign thus far as aggressive in any sense. Has he been saving up and building up for this, and now all of a sudden he's going to be, or is he going to continue to try to like stay in the background? I don't see how you can do that in a debate. I know that regardless of what he says, the left side of the media is gonna praise it, and the right side is going to attack it. But really, it's that middle ground that they're playing for. And that lead, I was looking at the polls today. It's a little bigger than what Clinton had, especially in places like Arizona. But I mean, as we know, that can evaporate quickly. So it's gonna be fascinating. There's one other question I want to get to on here from our followers, and I'll pull this up again so everybody can see it. Is Angelo asked, why can't the libertarian be a part of the debate? So I was like, that's got Kyle written all over it. So fortunately, we have a libertarian here who can answer that question for us. So what are your thoughts? What dynamic do you think Joe would have brought to the debate, or in her absence, what questions would you like to see from a libertarian perspective, Kyle?
Well, I think she would have brought a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of maybe a calm, maybe a more policy-driven debate.
Mm-hmm.
I think between Trump and Joe Biden, I think you're going to get a lot of name calling, a lot of sound bites. I don't think you would have gotten that with Joe. Like, I don't think Joe's going to call anyone a lying, dog-faced pony soldier or sleepy Joe. Or I just, she's not going to do that.
Maybe she should.
But it raises a good question. 40% of the American population doesn't identify really strongly as Republican or Democrats. 40%,
Yeah.
right? That's basically 40% of the population is independent. And so why don't we get third party? Why can't we get a third party in there? And I understand there are, I guess, restrictions about who's allowed to participate based on polling and things like that. But it seems crazy to me that 40% of the population doesn't like this. In fact, on the Burkean channel, I saw today there was a conversation between two liberals, and then a third with Chris jumped in saying how dissatisfied they were with Biden as a candidate.
Yeah.
Why can't we get Jo Jorgensen in there? Why can't we get a third party? She is obviously the leader of the third party candidates. I'm not saying we get every third party candidate on there, but why don't we get the leader of the third party candidates?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I couldn't see myself in any possible way voting for Jo. However, I would still like to see her in the debates, because we've got to move away from the dialectic. It can't, in my mind, get any more simplistic than one or two, right? And politics, as we know, is far more complicated to that. So even if it switches it up, it seems like we go with these. We have these primaries where there's just so many candidates, and then it gets cut down really quick, and now you have one, and then that's the end, right? Like that's the end. And I would frankly love to see it. So I kind of agree with that, because there's many aspects of the Trump administration. We were just talking about abortion. Obviously support Trump's actions there, support his justice, that kind of thing. But I struggle with Trump in many other ways, especially when it comes to government spending, right, which has been enormous. And I appreciate when the libertarians kind of call that out and talk about just how egregious it's become by both parties. And I think we need that, because clearly the Republicans and the Democrats are not going to change that pattern of behavior anytime soon. And it takes an outside voice to bring up those issues. So that's kind of my thought. Chris, let me go ahead and give you the last word on this for yourself and for the podcast, and then I'll come back to you one more time, Kyle, as we route it out. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, you can criticize both candidates from a libertarian angle. Biden's gun control policies and many other big government views. Trump the other day was praising a police officer for shooting a journalist with a rubber bullet, which is not exactly respect for individual rights or the First Amendment. Not exactly a libertarian position. I think Kyle is right that we've got this huge amount of Americans who don't really like the choices that they face in our electoral system. And it's a cycle. Jo Jorgensen doesn't get a blip in the polls because no one knows who she is, because she can't raise funds, because she doesn't have a major party backing her. But really, it goes back to having an electoral system that doesn't care about the majority of Americans and what they think. And really, the party right now that's pushing for big structural changes to how our electoral system works is the Democrats. Now, of course, they're doing that for their own partisan ends. Democrats aren't doing that as a favor to the Libertarian Party. However, I do think if we do start implementing some of these big structural changes, such as taking a look at the Electoral College, and if not abolishing it, at least making some changes to how it works, that will that'll move the Overton window a little bit, and that'll open the door to talking about other electoral changes, such as ranked choice voting, which is really the only pathway that I see to breaking the hold that the two-party system has on America.
Interesting. How about you, Kyle? Last word?
I'm sorry, I can't hear Kyle.
Yeah, I just kind of cut out on it.
That's because I was talking on mute, boys. You couldn't overhear that? All right. No, I think that that's a really good question, and I think that there are structural changes that need to happen, but I don't think the abolishing the Electoral College is one of them. I mean, I think that is a pretty, I wouldn't say divinely inspired idea, but I would say that it is a well thought out and necessary block, if you want to say, to mob rule, right? We live in a republic for a reason, right? Pure democracy is dangerous, and there's no reason why people in California and New York should tell me in North Carolina how to live. And I think that's a really important reason why we have the Electoral College and a republic instead of a democracy. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right, Chris. There are some structural changes that we can do to maybe kind of help third parties break in to the voting block, I guess. But yeah, I don't know where to start, but I know that abolishing the Electoral College is not where I'm willing to go.
Interesting. So, well, we're going to see some of that process at work. So we're going to have the debate on Tuesday. We're going to have this nomination coming up. I think it's going to be obviously pretty quick, given Trump's agenda. So we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next few weeks. So as always, thank you guys for being a part of the show. love having your perspectives on here as we go through this. It's always fun doing this live. So Chris, Kyle, thank you so much. And it could be a very different political world next time we meet. So I'm looking forward to it. And then as we head to this election, we can see who ends up being right and who ends up being wrong with our predictions. So thanks again, you guys. And I will see you again soon.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
What's up, John? How you doing, man? It is good to see you.
Hey, Wes, how's it going?
For Conservatism on Tap. I'm pouring my beer right now, so
yeah,
it's good to see you, man. I love that sign. Just looks fantastic, and you got the lighting there going on. You got the mood lighting. Like, that's perfect, man. I love it. So, how's your week been?
Gosh, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. Actually, I'm trying to remember, like, if anybody has asked me, like, how my week has been this week, and, like, you're the first person who's asked me that so far, because it's just been school, and, you know, just getting kids to and from places. But right now we're at a bit of a crossroads with determining school, because we are wanting to go into a hybrid format, 2 days on, 3 days off. 3 days are going to be asynchronous, and not even virtual learning per se. It'll be me kind of homeschooling curriculum, Ellie, and her kindergarten. It's kindergarten. But, like, we're hesitant to send her even 2 days at school, because there's already been reports of coronavirus at the school, just with the staff alone.
Yeah, I mean, my son is home now, actually, you know, and he doesn't have it, but someone in his class tested positive for COVID, and so you know, he's just going through a routine appointment and didn't have any symptoms and tested positive, so they had to shut the whole class down, and so he's home for the next 2 weeks. Even if he were to get tested and come back negative, they said nope, he's got to sit home. So I totally get it, man.
Like, don't tell me kids don't get it. You know, like, our cousins' kids have gotten it. Like, it's
a little easier on the symptoms, but they still get it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The other thing around here has been, we talked about Hurricane Sally hitting us last week, and now it's kind of shifted towards, like, our church and the cleanup, and we're starting to do work.
I saw that on your roof.
I was on a lady's roof yesterday, helping her put a tarp on, and I couldn't help but think, you know, about Dad, about, you know, the legacy that he established and stuff. Because if there's someone who knows a roof, it's our dad. George Seiler knows roofs, because he did that for so many years, doing charity work and working with the church and getting kids out there. And which leads me to the fact that today is his birthday. So there's some pictures there, and we gotta celebrate that it's Dad's birthday. And I picked some pictures up from him. I got to show you this one. This is, I think, when he was our age, right? So there he is with Mom, and he's got that big sombrero hat on, so playing guitar. So, like, yeah, like,
he would still do that. Like, he would still do that today if you gave him a sombrero.
Swerve on, I think, like, he would say. So, you know, when you think about Dad, like, he's always been such a fun and amazing guy and father for us. But what memories, like, pop up into your mind first of all?
Well, first off, I wanted to talk about, like, I think there was one of his birthdays where we decided to do a video about him being the most Christian man in the world.
Yes, I was looking at that the other day. It's one of the first videos I ever did.
He was playing off of that Dos Equis personality of the most interesting man in the world.
Right.
And I don't know if you still have that film.
I do. You know? I could definitely pull that up and release it at some point. But yeah, like, the thought being that Dad exemplifies, you know, what a Christian, you know, man and father should be in this world. Not as quite as well as Jesus, because that would be blasphemy, but as close as I can get and still be funny. Yes. Like,
I'm trying to remember the jokes that we did. It was like, he knows who wrote the book of Revelation, or he knows how to interpret Revelation, or man, you can help me out.
Dad is the Dos Equis guy. That's who he is. You know, I came up with all kinds of, like, Chuck Norris like quotes from him because of the astronomical you know, impact of his Protestant Christianity at work. Like, so I think I said the book of Revelation makes sense to him. Like, that sounds like.
He would say at the very end, he's like, I don't always have perfect days, but when I do, I thank Jesus Christ.
That's Dad, all right. So, you know, happy birthday, Dad. If you get a chance to watch this, we hope it's been a great one for you, and look forward to many more. So, Happy
If
to.
anything, I do want to talk about one memory, and that's or a few. Like he would go out on, he was a youth minister for, half his life, and I remember being little and still going on the youth trips. I wasn't old enough to go per se, but I still went because everybody was going. Our whole family was going. You were old enough to go, and like I just remember everybody rafting, and I wasn't old enough to raft, and I just felt like I wasn't old enough to do any of those things that were
Yeah.
mature, like for mature adults to do. But I remember like going into the worship service, and Dad was like stopping me, and he was saying like, "This is the most mature thing you can do. You can worship God, and
Yeah.
like you do that with us." And I just remember like that was where I found,
Yeah.
identified with the faith was during those youth camps when I wasn't even old enough to go.
Yeah.
So I remember those kind of things where like it was Dad telling me that I was old enough, that I was ready to enter into this journey of faith. And so I thank him for that.
One of the things that I think about, because now we're both dads, right? And I think about how, Dad's father was a World War II vet and struggled with all kinds of PTSD from the horrible things that he, had to experience over there, and struggled to be a father to Dad. And I remember him telling me when I was, very young that, like, hey, I got to make this up because I don't have anyone to follow. And thanks to him, we don't have that problem. We can look to Dad, and I can be like, I do have an example, a good one, a great one, to follow, the most Christian one, right? Like to
Yeah.
follow, and like things that Dad showed me. I mean, I'm like, how do you clean your kid's face without him bawling? And Dad's like, make it into a game, and then he just like cleans my kid's face, and I'm like, ever since then I've been doing that, and so many other things is that Dad made life fun. As you're talking about, as a youth minister, he knew how to do that, and that's what I try to do with my kids. I'm like, I try to do the same thing, is to make it fun the way that Dad would. And so we love you, Dad. We could probably talk about you all night, and the least we can do is thank you, and say
Happy
for
birthday,
all
Dad.
that you've meant to us. So you know what? And as conservatives, that's what we are about: is conserving what's good in our relationship with our dad. I can't think of anything better, honestly. So,
Yeah.
happy birthday to Dad. We're gonna spend a little bit of the show here going into a couple other topics, though. We're gonna look at. So I'm gonna bring this up. This is the Supreme Court justice. So we got a lot of stuff as we kind of think about this week. I know it's been hectic for you, John. It's been hectic for me. But there's
Yeah.
been a lot going on in the world that we can talk about here for a few minutes. And I just got to do a show with a couple of my good friends,
Yes.
Kyle and Chris, on the Refounding Fathers things. They wanted to do a show and go live, so we did that, and now we're here. And of course, they bring the heat every time, and we try to have that respectful exchange. But we talked about this new justice in Barrett, who is really just lighting up all the political narrative
Mhm.
and what she means. And I got to tell you, man, I don't think I couldn't be happier with who she is, and the fact that she's a Christian, Notre Dame Law School. She's a Catholic. She is pro-life. She's made that very clear. Someone that Trump has been watching for a while. He almost nominated her instead of Kavanaugh. And then of course with RBG Ginsburg passing away, it is a huge shift in the conservative direction, and something that, frankly, obviously we mourn the loss of RBG, but seeing the court shift in a conservative direction is, I mean, it's got to make us happy. So it didn't make Chris happy on my show just a few minutes ago, but it makes me happy. And Kyle's pro-life too, and we talked about abortion for probably 10 minutes and went back and forth on that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on her and the fact that this is now like a huge leading conversation going into the election?
I was actually talking with my wife about this,
Yeah.
and one thing that we were discussing was that back in 2016 when the vote came around to Trump, and there's so much hinged on who was he going to put on the Supreme Court, and of course now he's got his third time to pick, and that even might not be his last time to pick.
Right.
But I recall us both being conflicted because we knew what kind of person Trump is, and at the same time it's like, how can we pass up this opportunity to be able to put some conservative justices on the Supreme Court? And it's interesting how that question is coming back around again. And it's probably good for Trump. We might get into this a little bit later on in the episode, but it's probably good for Trump, especially during this election year. I mean, my thoughts, I started looking into to Amy, and like, I mean, she's a extremely intelligent woman. She was like voted from like the graduating class of Notre Dame, like professor of the year 3 times in a row, is what I read, which is extremely impressive. All of her colleagues respect her, even if they don't agree with her. I think that I mean, she's a mom of like, I think 7 kids too,
Yep.
that she's adopted from
Yep.
Haiti. I mean, that's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. And it just shows you that she can go from, you know, the Seventh Circuit Court to changing diapers, and it's like no problem for her. So she's this mom, she's this justice, she's this professor, a teacher, a scholar, like so many different things all
What's
wrapped
not
up
to
into
like?
one. I
Right.
know it's hard, and I think that's what's kind of hard
I,
for
s-
Democrats to
I
find.
s-
It's not like Kavanaugh. You don't
yeah.
have. It's not like Kavanaugh. Like it's hard not to like her.
Yeah.
And so what you end up having is the Democrats finding all these different loopholes, 2 hour rule, all these kind of things
I got
that
to tell you
kind of
this. I saw a liberal on Twitter, and he was trying to make it into a bad thing that she had adopted those kids, and he was writing a tweet. Maybe
come
next time we'll show it.
on.
And he was trying to say how, yeah, these white people who are adopting kids to assuage their guilt, and all that stuff, and that it's arrogant or domineering to apparently like sacrifice for a kid, like. And then there was a friend of mine. I was just on his podcast named Kyle Davenport, and he was like, you know, when you go too far to the left, like you end up in, crazy, right? Like the same way that if
Yeah.
you go way too far to the right, it's like a horseshoe. You guys meet in crazy town, because at what point is, a white person who takes it upon themselves to provide shelter and life and, like you said, changing diapers all the way up to like giving you a chance at an amazing life and launching you into that. At what point can that ever be considered a bad thing? Because raising a kid is no small task, and I can't imagine someone who, I mean, we're not talking about the wicked stepmom from Cinderella here. We're talking about a woman who like loves these kids and clearly took care of them. Just ask them,
Right. Yeah. I
is
mean,
your mom racist? No. Okay. And there's that, frankly, the liberals are setting themselves up for these attacks. If I were her, or if I was the Republicans consulting them, I would have those kids like, just ask them, like, tell us
is
about
it,
your
what,
mom.
do
I
you like your
remember
family?
they did the same thing with Bob McDonald's. They tried to make him into a misogynist who didn't like women. And so they brought when his daughter came home from Iraq, they had her do a commercial being like, "You trying to call my dad a misogynist? Like the same father who supported me, raised me, and has cheered me as I went to Iraq and fought for your freedom to say that? Uh-huh. Tell me more about how you think that." Like, just incredible.
Yeah.
And I feel like with someone like this, if you have to go to that extreme where you are standing against adoption of minorities and standing against like the actual love and care, then man, you've lost. Like,
Yeah.
and you
You
might
don't
want to
just have
check
regular
your own
compassion anymore.
racism at
I
that
mean,
point. Like,
people will criticize you for
unbelievable.
sending money. Oh, you're just sending money overseas. Like, what is that? Come on, like you can do better than that. You go visit overseas and you try and help out. Like, come on, you're just a white person trying to tell them what to do. And like, finally, like, okay, fine, I'll adopt. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Because
It's like,
adoption, like I don't know, people who I have many friends who have adopted. It is not an
same,
easy or cheap
same.
thing. You make numerous trips to the country. You have to show stability. You have to show that you're not just doing this to check a box. You are.
Not to
It is
mention the stress of like,
thousands
okay,
of
pack your
dollars.
bags. Yeah, like pack your bags. You might be able to, fulfill the adoption this next month, but then it's delayed. And like you
Years
have
of
all of that welcoming,
time.
the
Right.
tension of the
Right.
home of welcoming a new family member, and all of a sudden it's dissipated. Or they call you and like you got to be ready within
Unbelievable.
a week to just show up,
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to
And
pass you
then,
by.
oh, by the way, while she's doing that, she's also like, like a leading scholar at Notre Dame, which
Right.
is an
She's
incredible school.
researching
Yeah.
tenure, like
Like
all this kind of thing.
clerking for
So
Scalia. So, just a home run, John. And like, we've had so many discussions here about, the president, Donald Trump, and the administration and all those things. But
yeah,
you said it, how is Donald Trump going to be on the Supreme Court nomination process? That's been answered. A
and that's
plus, right? Like A plus. And
yeah.
so, there's so many things that I don't enjoy about Trump's administration, but the Supreme Court, which is one of the most important pieces, you've got to love it. You know, you've absolutely got to love the people that
Yeah,
he's.
I look forward to seeing, just how much Amy is going to bring some type of philosophical weight to, to the justices, or if she's just going to be a follower. That people don't really suspect her to be a swing vote. It's probably going to be Kavanaugh or someone else. But um, I I'm hoping that she brings a little bit more, as she ends up, growing into the seat, and just I know that she wants to go by the letter of the law. She's very much that student of Scalia, but is she going to bring some type of philosophical weight to it? Is she just going to interpret and that's it? Like it'll be interesting to see how much she comes into her own, because right now
I
I think
think
she's
she will
defined a little bit
quickly. I
more
mean,
by who
when you
she
think
studied under.
when you think about the fact that, like you said, she clerked for Scalia, so with the best, and then she was a potential nominee when Trump put forward Kavanaugh. He was also looking at her then, so she's had
Yeah.
several years of like getting ready for this moment, and
Hmm.
thought it was going to happen a couple years ago. So now that it finally is happening, like this is awesome, and you got to think that. I mean, let's say that Trump doesn't win the election, right, and then it's Biden. Obviously Biden
Hmm.
wouldn't have nominated her, right? And
Yeah,
so
of
it could have
course.
been another 4, 5, 6, 7, if there is a potential. She could have been waiting 8 years or more, for this opportunity. And so the fact that it's coming right now, like, and just an absolute like stars aligning, because can you imagine if it was reversed, if Trump had put forward her early on, right? And then he had Kavanaugh now, like, and you're
Oh
going
my
through,
gosh.
right? Like, because Kavanaugh, as we know, like, he had all that, that hugely controversial, the whole thing, and he had like the whole parties when he was younger that he was like had the weird like, look at my calendar, like he had
Yeah.
that whole thing, which kind of prolonged his nomination.
I'm wondering then
This is
if like,
perfect, right? Is now you got
yeah.
someone who I think we'll see what the Democrats dig up, and maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I think there's a strong potential that she has a much cleaner slate than Kavanaugh and an easier ride, and that couldn't come at a better time when they're trying to do this with only a few days before the election. So
That's what I'm trying to. That's what
pretty
I'm
awesome.
wanting to see is just how the Democrats respond and how that's going to end up affecting their election process. Because right now, to me, it just seems like they're just trying to pull out every little way they can to just hinder the process, even hindering certain, bills and motions and conversations that they would be bipartisan on. They're still trying to delay
Yeah,
so much of Congress because of this nomination. So I'm wanting to know how if that's going to fall back on them
yeah.
in some way, if that's going to bite them in the butt. So
We'll see, man.
there's all that going on
We'll see.
that I'm factoring
Well,
on.
the other thing, and I'm bringing up a picture now of Biden and Trump, is you've got the debates. They come up on Tuesday. Tuesday night is when you have the first debates. So we spent probably 20 minutes on Refounding Fathers talking about that. So with the last few minutes that we have here tonight, let's jump in. What would you like to see in the debates? What questions do you think need to be asked? We talked about everything from the Supreme Court to COVID-19 to like, Biden's mental state, all those type of things. What if you were, if they were like, hey, we're going to ask somebody from the audience, and they picked you, what would you ask the candidates, John?
Mm, mm, that's a good question. I guess I'd want to know. It would probably be coronavirus related. Just speaking from as a dad, if Biden, was elected, or if Trump is reelected, like what's going to be different?
Yeah,
What is Trump going to do differently, or what would Biden have done differently, and what would he be doing differently? I guess I would still keep it coronavirus related, just because that's affecting me the most right now. I'd love to know what Biden is for, because I think that Biden's strategy, if in my opinion, in the debates, is going to be trying to keep Trump on the defensive. If he can insult Trump and heat Trump up enough to where Trump stays on the defense a lot, then there's a good chance that Biden could have the debate. I mean, I know that like he could be prone to gaffing and things like that, but I mean, Trump has kind of set the bar extremely low, which is
that's what
dangerous
Kyle said.
because of how much his narrative of Biden has been the guy is sleepy, he's sleepy Joe, right? He can't string two words together. So like if he fulfills that, I mean, it's kind of what people expect. But if he comes in there and he doesn't like he only gaps maybe once or that's it, like that narrative is going to fall apart. And if Joe can actually keep Trump on the defensive, like that is going to be pretty wild to see and could be really bad, I
Mm.
think, for Trump. But yeah, I guess I mean, as much as I'd hate it for Trump, I suppose I'd still want to know. Like, I mean, you've got so many things coming out where, Trump knew how bad it was going to be back in March,
Yeah.
right? And you've got footage now of him recognizing how bad it was going to be, and yet he did not bring that narrative or anything substantial to to the American public, and that's really going to bite him. So, yeah, I'd keep it on the coronavirus.
Okay.
That's just where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, so we talked extensively about that, about COVID-19. We talked about the Supreme Court. One of the things that we talked about too is an absence of a third party, of not having a libertarian there, and how different that would be if you had like Joe Jorgensen, like actually like at the debate.
Yeah.
We talked about how we really feel like that's needed. But yeah, in this environment, I also talked about how on CNN they just re-aired some footage of Biden in a debate with Paul Ryan, and it was amazing how much sharper he looked in that debate than in some of the like commercials that he's been doing, recently, and speeches and stuff. I mean, age just wears on you, because that was 8 years ago, right? Like it's been a while, and so as much as
I thought he did okay against Bernie Sanders, right? Didn't he do okay against Bernie Sanders in the primary?
Well, I mean, to an extent, one of the things that happened with that whole nomination process is that all the other candidates kind of like united around Joe Biden and basically said he's our best chance of winning, and so we're all going to just kind of like, call it what it is. Everyone except I think Tulsi Gabbard, like she just kept fighting, but like everybody else, like was like, all right, let's get around Joe. Otherwise, it will be Bernie Sanders, and so he has consistently been that safe candidate. The biggest thing is, with the Supreme Court nomination, I asked Chris, the Democrat, on our other show, like, are you tired of losing? Because they've lost so many, justices, right? Like the Supreme Court, like they've lost numerous ones now. The number of like other, circuit court, federal justices that Trump has appointed. I mean, just so many things. Is that going to motivate you to get out there and run? And I just don't know if it is. You're right. He's got to give them something. And I think either one of two things is going to happen with Biden. Either he's been saving up and he's been waiting for this moment, and now he's going to turn into an attack dog and completely change his strategy from just being like, oh yeah, I'm the not crazy, not Bernie Sanders candidate, right? Like, and then as opposed to being the vicious attack dog that I think many Democrats want him to be. Is he going to turn into that? In which case it'll be super interesting. Or is he going to, is between age and him just not being that guy, is he going to have more of a like, performance of like nothing to write home about, and he did okay? And I think if he does that, like, that Trump he's gonna have some one-liners, he's gonna have some gifts, he's gonna have like, and they're gonna the conservatives can either attack Joe Biden and if he makes a gaffe, then there you go, there's a window, or B, Trump is like wrong, like he just makes another gif, like he does something as simple as that, and they're like, forget Joe, we're just going to talk about how awesome Trump is, and that could be a talking point regardless of how Biden does. So either way, there's going to be ammunition. Like it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's hard to debate Trump. Like there's not really a strategy, a playbook for debating someone who's just so unconventional about debates.
The trick is to not do what Hillary did. So there you go. Like we know they may not know how to debate him, but they know how not to debate him, and like what Clinton did not work. But who knows? I mean, maybe the Democrats are gonna still not learn.
Moderators don't call it out. Moderators don't call it out.
So we'll see. So anyway, that's going to be fascinating. That's going to come up Tuesday night. So I can't wait to watch that with you. And then we'll have another show on Sunday, kind of like breaking it down. We'll have some video clips of our favorite moments and all that. And I think
that sounds good.
It's going to be fascinating because Trump does need to make up some ground. He's in many ways, Biden is ahead of where Hillary Clinton was at this time last election. And so this could very well decide it. And I think this first debate is going to be the one that people pay attention to the most. So the first 20 minutes is going to be crucial, and it's going to be fascinating.
Trump can swing some advantage at some point Biden's going to have to swing back over to what is he for? What would bring a swing voter to him, and not just a never or anti-Trumper. What is Biden going to actually be for? And as soon as he switches over to what he's for, that's where Trump has that window to blast him. And we'll see. We'll see where that comes in. I don't know if that'll be in the first debate, but it's going to be good nonetheless.
Well, that's why I said a third party would have made it much more interesting. Is we already know what these guys are, like we know what Trump is for. And it's not that hard to, I mean, you want to hear Biden say it, but like we know, like he stands for the Affordable,
Still no, but
Care
I still
Act.
want to
Oh
hear
yeah,
it.
like expanding, government health care. He's not going to disagree with Trump too much on foreign policy because, Trump
Right.
hasn't been an interventionist. He stands for increased government spending, even though it already is very, very high. All those things, like we know. What is interesting to me is honestly probably aside from the Supreme Court, there's many places where both Republicans and Democrats agree in terms of, for example, entitlement spending. And short of a libertarian being in there, I don't think you're going to get any questions like, is government spending too high? Is government too big? They're not going to ask that. Like maybe if we get lucky, but even then, like they're both going to be like, no, it's fine. Like who cares about the debt? Like, and they'll say something slightly to the contrary, but like we both know. So, I think, yeah, it's going to come down to what we've talked about, the big issues between the Supreme Court and COVID-19 where they, disagree. But that's short of that. I think it's going to be all, your typical talking points. But hey, who knows? That's our guest. So for those watching, let us know what you think. We've gotten some responses already of what people want to see. And then as soon as that debate kicks off, we want to hear from you. So BreakingConservative.com. You can also take a look at us on YouTube. You can look at us on Facebook and Twitter. Message us privately. We'll be happy to respond to you and talk about this further. And then we will definitely see you next Sunday night with some footage and some responses from this debate. So again, happy birthday to her dad. I'm so happy to do that for him and all that. And then of course, happy to be here with you, John. So have a great week. Hope it's a little less hectic for you. And I'll see you soon, buddy.
All right.